Three, two, one. Awesome. Okay.
We're
Everyone,
here.
yes, finally we're here. Kit, so nice to meet you here. Yeah, we want to speak a little bit about p5.js and your work and the Processing Foundation stuff. So, yeah, first of all, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to meet people from the Processing Foundation. As you can imagine, I'm a massive fan since many, many years, and love the work of the PF. So, yeah, please introduce yourself and let us know who you are.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm also like really, really excited to be here and to share some of the recent stuff we've been working on with p5.js 2.0. And I think because I joined so recently, I've been at Processing Foundation since November last year. So
Hmm.
I'm still in the process of like transitioning from being a huge fan of Processing Foundation to actually being on the team, which has been really exciting. So I joined as a p5.js project lead. And that project has started in 2013. But since 2020, it's been using like a rotating leadership model where every few years there's a new project lead. And I think that's a really cool and exciting model to be a part of in open source development.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know, would you like to hear a little bit more about like how I got there, or shall we jump into p5.js 2.0, which is kind of the most recent big thing that's going on
It's,
in
I would say it's up to you, but of course, we would love to hear a little bit about how did you come to creative coding and what was your journey into
yeah.
that thing? Will be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I've been doing creative coding, I think before it was like really a term that I was aware of.
Hmm.
I recently remembered that my first program that I ever made for like money was like in 2003, and it was a Java applet that made like an ellipse with cuts out of it
Hmm.
for a series of oil paintings by this painter, Michael Morel, in University of Pittsburgh. And I was like a high school student, so it was like a really kind of serendipitous thing. So I remember the experience of doing random generative art in Java and how difficult that was, but I had no idea about processing at the time. But in many ways, it's like my own creative coding trajectory is like similar in length and the kind of historical hallmarks of like the processing ecosystem. Around that time, I mostly focused on learning JavaScript, and I was sort of self-taught, but I think that's really not a great way to summarize it because I learned and practiced JavaScript for like little fun toy game development in like a public library at the like in Pittsburgh,
That's
uh,
cool.
which was amazing because at that time it's like you had limited time on the computers, so you had 30 minutes every 2 hours.
Hmm.
And it'd be like randomly assigned. So you'd have to like sprint, type in your number, do things for 30 minutes, and then walk away and think about it. So I still think that for me, it's like 75% of the time spent programming is not spent looking at the computer because I'm very used to like thinking about what I'm going to do, what have I done, how do I adapt it,
Hmm.
kind of without necessarily fiddling with like individual characters and code. So I think for me, computer and creative coding practice is like a practice of algorithmic thinking and of system design in a way that doesn't always include the computer.
Hmm.
And then like I'm very, very excited to talk today about like the variable font stuff and with working with text because I really love like algorithmic poetics and like combinatorial poetry, like what happens from combinations of text, what happens when you put text on a screen. And really exciting references for me are algorithmic but not computational in nature. So for example, something like a book that has 10 lines on each page, but where the pages are cut up so you can open it to any section,
Hmm.
and to find a combination that more or less no one in the world has ever seen before just because of the low probability of that. I think that's a really interesting form of physical algorithmic poetry. And I'm not sure, are you familiar with like the love letter generator reference?
Not really, but I can imagine what it is. It's a generator for love letters, I guess.
It's like a fill in the blank kind of thing, and it was like
Uh-huh.
from like the Mark computers when computers were as big as a room. So I'll send you a link after this so you can share it.
Cool.
Um, but it's a really really cool reference of like historic creative coding that was like in a very different context. So like today it's like yeah, okay, I can imagine that that's very easy, but this is like at a time when that was like really um, expanding our imagination of what a computer is capable of. So I think it's like I feel very connected to various aspects of like computing history.
Hmm.
And I think it's very exciting to continuously re-encounter those. And so when I encountered P5 in 2019, there were a couple of really interesting parts to it. Like one, it's like this joy of JavaScript, which is extremely lightweight. So like when I was learning to code, the fact that I was able to do it on a computer that like zeroed itself every half an hour, but I was still able to do it. It's because JavaScript runs anywhere. And I
Hmm.
actually think that a lot of the code that was written back then still like parts of it run, which is really incredible. Like I really love like net art archiving
Hmm. Me
effort.
too. Me too. Totally. I love that.
It,
It's
it's
amazing.
like JavaScript and HTML energy is like
Oh
it's
gosh.
really inspiring
I
to me.
love it. I love it.
And
Ah, yeah.
so my actually first experience with p5.js, which was I was like, oh, this is cool. I've been meaning to try it out. I think that's a very common attitude to have. Like I find it very often. It's like, oh, I've been meaning to try out this thing that I've heard.
Hmm.
And I had some sort of older processing sketch I had written for something like ages ago, ages before that. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just paste this sketch. And it was like a little sign flower or something. I just pasted it into the editor and I removed all of the type declaration, like types of variables. So I just made the most shallow edit to make it look like JavaScript and not like Java, which was like that's never gonna work. Like I just surely I'll have to change more of it than that. But it just worked. And I just like as a software engineer, I think that that was a really fun and magical experience because I was like, ah, there's something about this language of expression that is like really has interesting mutual intelligibility where you can like really work in a variety of different contexts and it's still like that's the language that you speak. Like it really is kind of it's a library, but also it felt more like a language for expression.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just liked how fast it was to create stuff.
That's great. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
I was really excited when Processing Foundation was looking for the kind of next P5.js lead. I'm still really excited to actually be in this role. And yeah, I think a lot of the things that I'm bringing into it have to do with like kind of the way that I position my own like practice in a historical context. But also the experiences that I've had outside of JavaScript and how they kind of make me appreciate JavaScript on its own terms, both like modern JavaScript and kind of more, archivable JavaScript. And so, yeah, I think that there's
Mhm.
so many different parts of it that come up, even though in my own professional kind of life as an engineer, I've worked more frequently with Python, for example, in the past years. And before that, of course, with Java. So it's really fun to re-encounter like JavaScript in this way through this project.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That must be a dream project, like working on that thing. I mean, I think I wouldn't have the skills, but you as an engineer, I can imagine that this is such an honor to work on such a great project. It's amazing. I just wanted to repeat a few things that you
Yeah.
said that I really resonated with. First of all, I mean, in this whole conversation about AI, and I'm now planning an event about like creative coding and AI, question mark, like how does it make sense? And what you said
Mm,
is it's about system construct, like developing systems, which is something
yeah.
is I find very strong, and it's also about thinking algorithmically instead of just thinking computationally. Like it's a way of
Yeah.
thinking, and that's something I always emphasize in my teaching. I want to make clear that we are not coding a software. I mean, we are doing that, but first of all, we are training our brain and reflecting on our own thoughts, and trying to find a language to create art that is depicting the digital and kind of questioning some things that we could not really question without this language. So yeah, that's something I wanted to put out there. And I love working in libraries too. I think it's I would love to see a creative coding library where everybody meets from the scene. Like, I don't know, that would be awesome.
Yeah. More social connection. I think it's like the
Yeah.
idea of coding. I think the more associating creative coding with like the act of coding itself, like
Hmm.
this very, often solitary, you're sitting at your computer, it kind of shifts the focus away from all the other activities. So like the talking about it, the hanging out, the
Yeah.
ideation, and what you said in terms of the relationship with like the current conversation with creative coding and AI. It's like how do you teach that like systems oriented thinking or algorithmic think or however, whichever aspect of that you want to emphasize. I really feel like um, there's a degree of like encountering conversational LLM tools that are specifically designed to make it seem like the task is super easy if you just use
Hmm.
this thing,
Hmm.
um, undermines how much skill it takes to talk to it well in order to produce a really solid
Yes.
technical artifact.
Hmm.
And so I think that is really counterproductive, especially within learning. If you think that by talking to this machine,
Hmm.
um, you don't have to think algorithmically in order to like, get it to have interesting output. Like it's
Hmm.
still kind of like the more you know how to program, the easier it is to use these like tools that don't require you to program. And I think that's an interesting challenge, I think, pedagogically. Because it's like, how do you teach that skill that
Hmm.
if you have it, does make the process better,
Hmm.
but then it kind of also hides it.
Yeah, you need
So
to understand it, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I've been
yeah,
teaching lately. I've been giving a course, and there was a student, and they were trying to tweak a system that they wrote, and became so messy. And I was like, oh my God, this is what AI does, right? I mean, people
yeah,
don't know how to express what they want, and it's just creating a lot of messy code. And in the end, it's also making it very fuzzy people don't see the concepts anymore. They don't see the clarity of, I mean, I always explain that there are five principles that you have to understand, like arrays, loops, functions, variables, and conditional statements. And these five things kind of make up a simple sketch. And of course, then you can open up this portal to object-oriented programming, but this is a massive change, and I mostly
yeah,
kind of
that's a
avoid
big, big
it.
step. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, avoid it. I try to stay under this threshold because there's already so much to explore and to learn. And I am a learner myself all the time, right? I learn a lot from my students. So yeah, that's very interesting to see. I think we are very in sync with that
Yeah, because
perspective. That's very
I feel
nice.
like I mean these tools are around and they can be very, very powerful. But I
Sure.
think for me it's like fundamentally, if I see someone who's already very good at programming
Hmm.
also excel at using the tool
Hmm.
more than somebody who's like maybe a beginner in a particular programming skill, then that tells me that that skill is still necessary,
Hmm.
but it's in that process hidden. So I think that that's like, how do we make it more accessible to like access those skills and building those skills in the first place?
These are
So
wonderful, wonderful words. I love that. That's so cool. Awesome. All right. I think, yeah, let's talk about P5.js.
yeah.
So what happened? I mean, P5.js version 2, that's a massive step. Let's
It
talk about
really
it.
is, and it's like and just to be clear, because I joined at the end of last year, I'm sort of joining in the middle of this process,
Hmm.
where it's been over a year of community feedback, input, ideation, and implementation. So
Hmm.
the kind of requests for feedback and so on have started at the end of 2023.
Hmm.
And for a little bit of context, the project itself was started in 2013 as like a exploration of processing for the web and using JavaScript. And then in 2019 was the version 1.0 release.
Hmm.
So it's been a few years, but the project overall is about 10 years old, but the like the most recent stable version, is a little less than that.
Hmm.
So with 2.0, the question was basically brought very broadly to the community of like what kind of, what would you like to see in 2.0?
Hmm.
And the requests were open both to like new features and ideas as well as to potentially breaking changes and like fundamental refactors of the system, which I think is like really exciting. I think it's really exciting to be in
Hmm.
a space where you both have a lot of durability and a lot of like consistency. I think the fact that the processing foundation, the processing ecosystem has been around for over 2 decades is like an incredible statement to durability.
Absolutely.
Um, and at the same time, being able uh, to enact change and to be able to use kind of newer technologies or like newer tools and to integrate with like the rest of the JavaScript ecosystem. So I think that's also a really important part. And so both of those kinds of requests were really open. In every case, because P5.js has like access as a core value, which was kind of one of the major statements that the 2019 to like 2020 1.0 release and around their contributors conference, where it was like there will be nothing added to p5.js that does not increase access.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a core value, continues to be a core value,
Mm-hmm.
is something that I was really moved by also when I was first encountering p5.js and when I was, you know, excitedly joining the team. So I think it's something that like it continues to be really alive. And when we talk about access, we talk about inclusion, web accessibility, beginner friendliness, access on multiple devices. So, questions of performance are not questions of performance on a technical level, just in terms of, oh, everything must go faster all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
rather, how can things be performant on multiple different types of devices? So, for example,
Sure.
I'll share some sketches today, but like basically everything can be also done on mobile or on things that are maybe,
Weaker
not the
computers.
newest machine ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of different aspects of access that are covered also by the technical changes of 2.0. So then the kind of entire set of different ideas that were gathered from the community were reviewed by like an advisory group and like the core committee that was then working on implementation. So that included the prior project lead Shen Yi and several kind of contributors whose names are, all listed in like the release notes. So when I share my
Yeah.
screen, also show a little
Cool.
bit of the release notes because I think it's very, very exciting overview.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2.0 release in particular, which is as of last Thursday, so we are 1 week fresh. The first patch has just been rolled out a few days ago, so it's really, really exciting to see it live. And that's really focused on the major refactors, the breaking changes, the performance improvements, and kind of paving the way for some of the additive features that are then going to take advantage of those kind of improvements.
Wow, that's amazing. So you mentioned breaking changes.
I did.
What happens? What happens when I run an old sketch in P5.js 2.0?
It really depends what was happening in the old sketch and what it's using.
Mm-hmm.
So I can also share when I share my screen, I show the compatibility, but I'll give you the short version now. So most sketches will just run.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few notable exceptions. So, for example, loading assets rather than having you have the setup, the draw, and the preload that you would have to use to load assets. Like there is no preload.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, JavaScript asynchronicity is used. So the async and await keywords allow you to load assets in the setup method. So actually, in all the
Mm-hmm.
examples today where I'm loading fonts, it's there. This is obviously something that if you were interested in transitioning to 2.0, it's something that takes a little bit of effort. So we have a couple of different compatibility add-ons.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, if you go to the p5.js editor and you go to there's now a settings modal where you can change versions. If you change to the 2.0 version, which I'll show, you also see a number like these three different compatibility add-ons that includes reinstating preload. So you can still continue to use it, which means you have all the features of 2.0 or 2.x
Mm-hmm.
at the same time as being able to use preload the way you would have in 1.x. So that's one class of changes. Another class of changes is the deprecation or removal of a bunch of different functions that can be used just like in pure JavaScript. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like slice type of functions. So there's a list of them. I've also included these in a kind of short community survey that I did when I first started because I wanted to see how many people outside of GitHub were really familiar with what was happening with 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've written that up briefly in a blog post. And the main takeaway is that like a lot of folks who are users of p5.js, who are in the community, who are also, very active, aren't necessarily part of the GitHub conversation. So it's really, really
Mm-hmm.
important to support compatibility for all existing sketches and also to have the like 2.0 rollout be something that like invites experimentation, invites use, but doesn't kind of immediately introduce all these changes.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, the timeline started at like end of 2023. Right now, 2.0 is available. It is not default. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
using the P5.js editor, it will continue to go to 1.x.
Mm-hmm.
1.x is still supported with patches I mean, anything that's critical will be updated regularly, and everyone is welcome to continue using that. It's 2.0 is opt-in, and there's these add-ons. So for example, the functions I just mentioned that have been removed, there's an add-on for that for like data.js that
Okay,
reinstates prior functions.
cool.
The third one that I'll show today is the Shapes API has been refactored to be like way easier to get started with. So if you've ever used like begin shape, end shape, Bezier, vertex, and that kind of stuff, if you
Mhm.
remember how sometimes it's a little tricky to get it to work.
Mhm.
So a lot of that has had like really substantial improvements, but of course that means it looks a little different. So there's also a shapes add-on. But so basically you can have every sketch that you've had in the past with 1.x with
Mhm.
compatibility add-ons, and you can decide to transition out of them at whatever pace you want.
That's great. Awesome.
1.x will continue to be supported until at least minimum next August, so August 2026.
Hmm.
Because any major changes that we do to changing like the default version in the editor has to happen in between teaching. So it
Yeah.
has to happen in the summer. So at minimum, it will be until next summer. So there's all this time where it's available to everybody because the beta's been available, but it's hard to get started with the beta. It's
Mm.
hard to try out the beta. This
That
way, it's
makes sense.
truly available to everybody to have opinions. It's totally optional. There are two websites. There's the beta website that has the 2.0 documentation. The stable website is still there. So
Wow.
1.x is there and alive.
I can imagine that's a lot of work to make sure everything, like now you're kind of having two tracks. You have to make sure
Yeah.
everything, oh, this is terrible. And
Well,
I,
but I think this is the way to I feel like I hope that we are always asking how do we balance change and durability,
yeah.
and then whatever our best version of the answer to that is, that's the one we're doing.
But so, what should, do I have to do? Because I have my curriculum with 20 courses, hundreds of lessons.
Yeah,
Many of them have p5.js code. Actually, all of them are translated to p5.js. And I use the preload function in the course about typography and about images,
yeah.
and probably a few more. So that means I have to refactor the code in the end, right? That makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you want to transition to 2.0 earlier than like next summer, you
Yeah.
can. If you find because this obviously affects a lot of educators. So this is you're
Yeah.
absolutely not the only person who is
Hmm.
affected by this. So this is a true and open invitation for anyone who has like materials. If you see that this refactor is not productive to your teaching, then we can always revisit the conversation of should we actually have the preload add-on built in? So like the
For
fact that
me,
it's currently as a separate thing,
mm,
maybe it should be built in. This is something that's already been raised on GitHub. The only reason not to have it built in 2.0 is because with semantic versioning, when you have changed from 1 point something to 2 point something, it's possible to remove stuff.
I know. Yeah.
And this way, it's like we can add it back.
Hmm.
But if we started with 2.0, we couldn't remove it. And
Mm.
the idea of updating from preload to promises is to make it more possible for users, for students of P5.js to use other aspects in the JavaScript ecosystem, which do use promises. So
Hmm.
even if you use the preload add-on, promises are now supported and expected within P5.js, which is a huge improvement for any add-on libraries that already were using asynchronicity, but had
Hmm.
to do workarounds to work with preload.
I mean,
Um,
I like that because the good thing about it is like now the code of processing, which is the tool I mostly use for teaching because we are working a lot with motion graphics and rendering. So
yeah.
now P5.js and processing go a little bit closer together, which is great. I think preload was a little bit like it felt because I'm coming from the processing ecosystem, the processing world, it felt a little bit like a hack or something that doesn't really, make sense in
I
the
mean, it
first
was
sight.
it made sense historically, you know what I mean? I
Hmm.
think that there's like it was there for a reason, and that
Sure.
and that was
Yeah.
a good reason. But
Hmm.
like the landscape of JavaScript changes, and I
Hmm.
think it's worth asking, is this reason still a good reason today? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no.
Yeah.
Point of this is to create the space to be able to have that conversation.
Sure. I'm totally down for changing all the codes because I want to be, on track with the development of P5.js, of course. So that's actually a good thing, even though it's a little bit of work. That's fine.
But
That's
yeah, but
awesome.
it's one of those things where it's just like, we also are working on creating more like tutorials, walkthroughs, supporting
Hmm.
proactively people like authors of existing add-on libraries, as well as educators and so on. So I think this is something that like any kind of ideas that you have on how this can be more productive of like or constructive for your work as a teacher or for your students as learners, I think that we're
Hmm.
really excited to hear that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there will probably be very excited about a few more features that you announced. And I
Mhm.
can't wait to see the variable fonts feature, especially. So
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, do you want to share your screen and show what's going
Yeah,
on your computer?
let's jump into it.
Cool, cool. Let's
Okay, so
do
a
it.
couple of things. I am sharing here the new reference website. So again, this the normal one, the stable one, p5js.org is there, but beta.p5js.org contains the new reference.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of different things that I'll show today. So there's, uh, of course, the text weight, as well as a couple new functions. So if you work with text and font, you might have been working with text to points.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of new ones that are really exciting. I'll show today text to contours and text to model. There's also text to paths,
Wow.
which are all provide different ways to kind of like work with text as a material. Whereas text to points gives you a set of points for a string as a whole. Text to contours is going to split it up by letter. Text to paths is going to give you directions from each one. And text to model is going to integrate with 3D mode.
Oh my God.
Um, with and finally, we'll start right away with load font. And just like to give you a sense of what this looks like, rather than having the preload, as I mentioned, we have the waiting for the font. So really similar, it's just integrated into setup. And in this case, for example, you would be able to like add something like a line there to have a different background while the loading is happening and so on. So there's a little bit more possibility to um, do something other than like the loading screen. Okay, so I'll start with a sketch that doesn't include variable fonts, and then we'll add variable fonts. But because I really like combinatorial poetics, I wanted to start with something that's like a meaningful text. So here I'm loading some words that were generated in an internet free fridge poetry workshop this weekend at Rhizome World. So that was co-authored, like
Mhm.
the materials were co-authored with Nikki, and so I'm basing a lot of these examples on those materials. And these words are were those that were developed in that were kind of contributed to in that workshop.
Mhm.
So you'll find lots of familiar things here. I've hidden kind of the preparing the words and fetching them in this like poetry.js. So I'm not going to get into that in this moment, but I'll share all the links. So yeah, so I wanted to point out that as we're waiting for the words to load, we are able to like draw on the background and so on. And execution and setup is stopped until whatever assets are loaded. And then we have our draw loop, so we're able to show the text. So as a starting point, we're going to add the variable, like a variable font. And this is something where we can find like any font on, for example, Google Fonts, look at something that has the variable font kind of technology, and find an embedding of it. I've prepared one that uses weight, so epilogue. And
Mm.
so
You can get
maybe,
them directly from Google Fonts. You load them directly from.
yes.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that has been added, I'll just pop over into the release notes for a sec, is that one of the typography improvements is loading fonts via CSS. There's some ongoing work on this that I'll mention at the very, very end of this presentation. But yeah, this is really exciting. So you don't necessarily have to download things. So here, let's, let's use the font. Okay,
There,
great.
there we go.
And then if we just want to animated, for example, with something like frame count. So here I'm using frame count and a sine function to create like a very small animation. And I'll map that. And I know that sine goes from -1 to 1, but I'll map that on something like stretching it like a rubber band to go from 100 to 900. How do I know which weights are supported? In the Google output, if it if you get the embed code with the weights, it'll show you in also the URL that you get. So here we know that the lowest one is
Wow.
100, the
Beautiful.
highest one is 900. So for example, if I search now for epilogue, I go to get font, I'm gonna delete that one, get the embed code. Ah, okay, so I get the full access. I actually don't want the italic, so I just have the one weight for that. And here I can control which axis. So if there's multiple axes in the variable fonts, this you can control that here, and you see what's actually included in the link. So here, some fonts will go from 300 to 800, so you know what that is.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. And so now it's going to smoothly interpolate based on that variable. So
Oh my
that's really
God.
exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so and that's just there. I didn't have to download anything.
That's
Um,
crazy. This is going to be, this is a crazy feature. This is amazing. And people
yeah,
are really waiting for this, especially from this graphic design sphere where I feel home in.
yeah,
So that's wow. That's such a
awesome. I'm so excited. I'm really like excited to see what people come up with in this. I think that like I'm personally just I really love typographic and textual works.
yes, me
So
too.
this is like really also exciting to see what it inspires. Would you like to see some of the kind of more shapes oriented stuff with text to with like text to points, text to contours?
Yeah, but one more thought on
Yeah.
this. I think it's not just great because you can tweak fonts in a playful way. I think honestly, I'm personally not that interested in that because my style and this, typographers in design universities often learn to be very, very like choose a specific cut, which is something we can question. Everybody can work the same way. But I think what this is going to do is it's creating um it will immerse more people into the world of creative coding because now it's finally possible to do these things. Before it was like very limited, and the arguments from typographers were always like, p5.js is not really, it's not an advanced graphic design tool, but this is a huge step towards that kind of, um, yeah, that description. And I think that's amazing. That's really amazing.
That's so amazing to hear. I'm really happy to hear that because I do think that like this something like this can like support, creating animated posters
Yeah.
and like design objects that yeah, previously would have been like a little bit more difficult to get going or to like really tweak in the way that you want.
Yeah.
Actually, as a graphic designer, maybe it would be interesting to point out that there's two different ways to measure text width now.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
previously there was text width, and there was like kind of a bit of a estimate based on the browser font width. But I'll show you the one that's okay. So what I've done here is that I'm creating a comparison between two different functions, between font width
Hmm.
and text width on the current bottom word. And I'm going to draw a rectangle to demonstrate the width. So the height of the rectangle really doesn't matter here, but the blue one is going to be the kind of more loose measurement, which is the one that's currently available in the text width measurement and the 1.x. And the other one is going to reflect like the tight bounding box, which might be more useful for other applications. So it really depends on kind of the need that you have.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if this is one of those things where like, let's see.
All right. Okay. So one is
So
really like on the horizontal, it's exactly
yeah,
positioned at the beginning and the end of the
so
line.
that's the
Oh
new
yeah.
one.
Oh.
So one of them has been available before, and one of
Yeah.
them, which is the tighter bounding box one, so that's now available. So I think you can have like a lot more kind of fine-grained control if that's something that you're looking for.
Wonderful. That's so cool. I love it. Amazing.
Awesome. Okay, I'd love to also show you some of these like working with text as like with like the text objects with like points and
Mhm.
shapes.
Mhm.
So what I'm gonna do to that is I'm gonna pull out displaying the text as a separate function. So we're gonna dwell on that function for a second. So right now I'm still just displaying it using text, which
Mhm.
draws a word at the coordinate x and y. In this case, I've centered everything. So x and y is going to be 0,
Mhm.
-50, plus
Yeah.
50, or 60. So this is still text, but we're going to use the text to points, which might be already familiar, but as a recap, this is something that uses the string that you give it, so the word,
Mhm.
in this case,
Mhm.
whatever the each of the words is, and samples it based on a sample factor. This is a number between 0 and 1 that kind of grabs some points along the curve. In this case, we're just going to actually start with points, just so you can see the sampling.
Oh, it's points. Yeah, it's a, you have
Sorry?
a yeah, points, right? The function is called points.
Oh, sorry, sorry. I meant to just like draw a point, but
Ah, got it. Okay.
I think I'll just stick with the shape that's there.
Oops.
Okay. I know how to fix that. So, first of all, let me see if this does fix it, and then if it does, then I'll comment on the on why.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I'm a big fan of like asemic work, so I love doing stuff like this. This just really brings lots of joy to me.
Wow, this is so cool.
So a
Wow.
couple things to note. So first, I'm going to talk mention the spline vertex here and what it's doing differently, and then I'll talk a little bit about the WAF add-on that I just added. Okay. So here, if you've ever worked with the begin shape, end shape, spline vertex, you might know that you need like anchor points in the start and the end for one point X, and
Hmm.
that it's like can be a little bit tough when it connects. So you'll have a smooth point, but that connects in a sharp point. Well, this is something that we cover in the compatibility. So by the way, this is the compatibility guide and add-on. This is something that's accessible from the editor.
Hmm.
And here's a side by side.
Hmm.
So if you have, first of all, it used to be called curve vertex. Now it's called spline vertex. So that's a little bit different.
Hmm.
There's so this is part of the shapes refactor. It's quite different, but we try to create some examples here. You don't need this extra anchor that you used to, and the ending of it is smooth.
Hmm.
So that means in the next step, when I change this from text to points to text to contour, I'll be able to have smoother endings around the letters themselves. But before I jump into that, quick note on this, which I think I just removed by accident when I was cleaning up the code before the call. But this add-on, and I'll include this in the link in the set of links, is part of ongoing work to make the loading a little bit easier. So for example, if you had the TTF file or the OTF file, it could have also just worked. There's a few open issues to make Google Fonts loading work smoother, and that add-on helps to create like the glyph information that's needed for like text to points, text to model, and so on. So I think that there's a few of these like little challenges, and because this is still kind of ongoing work, but this is something that you're really welcome to monitor how it's doing. For
Hmm.
example, if you check if anybody's interested in monitoring what's happening or in contributing, this is the status board for like the
Hmm.
next minor release. This would be the 2.1 will be the next one. So we'll see what ends up being in there. We would like to release every month or two, the same as like the p5.js editor and the processing code has like a minor release around that cadence. So here there's like various bug fixing related to fonts and typography, primarily around this loading. So for initial use, very straightforward. when you start to use more complicated features, it might need a little bit of tweaking, but this is an active and ongoing work that I'm
Mhm.
also really excited to see.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay. I'll show you the kind of contour. So let's say we have the same kind of thing. I'll keep the sample factor really low.
Hmm.
And rather than points, I have here the contours. The difference being is that it's going to be not a list of points, but a list of lists of points.
Hmm. Ah, cool. For each letter.
Yes.
Awesome.
So sometimes you want one, sometimes you want the other. It's really,
Mm.
it really depends.
That's so nice.
So
That was actually my next question. Nice.
yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay, so we have the same thing. Still have the spline vertex, so we should have some like smoothness.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay.
we have the begin shape, begin contour uh, for inside. So for example, if you use like masks and stuff like that, you could use
Hmm.
this there. It's a little out of scope for right now. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so you have,
Wow. This is amazing. You can create. Wow, this is super nice. And the sample factor, if you what is the value that you need to choose to make it look normal? Like in quotes, normal, like
I think anything more than 0.3 feels relatively almost smooth.
uh-huh.
You can make it higher. It's much more performance. So if you've worked with text to points in the past, you might know
Mm-hmm.
that if you make the sample factor really high, then
Uh-huh.
it starts to really like noticeably slow down. And also because it depends on the number of points, like longer text will perform differently than shorter text, which I think can be sometimes a little difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in this case, first of all, it's like I think based on testing, it was like 350% improvement. That's in the release notes,
Wow.
in performance for text to points, and also these convenience features. In terms of just like, does it look about right? Yeah, I think it's like half or almost 0.3. Yeah,
I,
that's definitely you can see that it's not
mm,
quite right.
yeah.
But it's starting to get very close.
Super nice. But actually, it does nothing else than going around the path and distributing points around
Yep.
the path of the font, right? Yeah, it's super, super nice. That's awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Uh,
Wow. Wow, wow,
a
wow. This is
couple more
massive.
minor shape things
Mm-hmm.
just while we're here. So let's maybe have a separate shape for each letter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've used shapes before, you might have used Bezier shapes or quadratic, like so Bezier vertices, quadratic vertices. Those
Mm-hmm.
are now the same because they are kind of the same thing. They're
Mm-hmm.
rather Bezier vertices of different order. So if we want to have Bezier vertices, normally, previously you would have to give it three uh, coordinates for like the anchor points of an order 3 curve. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, you can use very similar syntax to something like this.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'll just paste it in so I'm not fumbling around.
Ah, you have it on your on another screen, right? I
Yeah.
guess. Okay, cool. Ah, makes sense.
So, couple things here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I still need the anchor. However, for the curve, you need 3 points. And here, if I just want to take each 3 points, I need to stop drawing before so for example, if I have 14 points, I'll just stop drawing at 12. So that's what this does. I just set the limit to whatever is the most, like the set of 3 points within this letter. That's the most that I can get. And then I'll
Mm-hmm.
draw that as a vertex. So it's a very kind of rough kind of rendering of this thing, but this is going to, oh, my sample factor is really high, so you don't really see it doing
Mm-hmm.
wild things. But yeah.
Sweet. Sweet, sweet. That's cool.
And in terms of demonstrating, okay, yeah. So that's like the order 3. So by default, the order is going to be 3. And when I say order, it's because it's something that can be set with a function basic order. So if you wanted to, so by default, it's 3. But if I wanted to do quadratic curves, which is order 2, I change again the logic of my like limit. So okay, stop if it's an odd number, stop at an even number. so that I make sure to have the right number of vertices, but I
Hmm.
don't have to change the actual call. So here, the shape of it is going to like have a different vibe because of the way that the curves are split up.
Gosh, this is amazing. Wow.
So
Beautiful. People will
yeah,
start creating fonts with that, I'm pretty sure.
I would love to see that. I think that there's so much possibility there. Like you can do
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Um, I can lastly show you text to model. So
Hmm.
we'll
Oh,
move.
please. Yeah, please.
Yes, we will move to a different thing here. And this is just like an example with a different font. It's not a variable font. I'll just up the sampling factor so it's a little bit more legible.
Hmm. But that
Uh,
doesn't make any difference, right? I mean,
what do you mean?
it's like you can use variable fonts or any other font for this 2 3D conversion.
In this case, because of the loading thing, you need the TTF or the OTF file. In some cases, it's like a little inconsistent the moment you get to these methods. So like
Hmm.
here, just for the purposes of demonstration, this works
Hmm.
with that WAF thing you've seen before.
Hmm.
For non-variable fonts, for variable fonts, it's a little bit inconsistent. So I'm not gonna
Hmm.
show it quite yet, but this is the thing to watch out for, basically.
Okay, cool.
Um, So let's see. So here we have, I've changed this already to WebGL,
Hmm.
which means to center it, I also don't need to translate because the coordinate is now in the center of the sketch. Everything else basically stays the same. And rather than having like, let's add, yeah, rather than having the shape being drawn with contour, we create a model.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I didn't define this function.
Hmm.
I didn't define the variable. Yeah. So if I now, so if I now add orbit control, you'll see that this has a 3D character to it. And so,
Oh my goodness.
and does it work on your phone? It does.
Oh my God. But one question, since when is orbit control implemented into p5.js? Do you know that?
I'm actually not sure.
I
In
didn't know
all of the
that.
examples that we have in 2.0, it's there. So I didn't even question it.
Wow.
But here you have some directional lighting. Let's get rid of this stroke.
This is incredible.
So
This is insane. Wow. Yeah, this
So yeah, so
is.
so some variable fonts work. You do have to give it a TTF though, and it'll be the same kind of behavior.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you want, yeah, do you have anything that comes to mind immediately that you'd like to see?
First of all, thank you so much for this hard work and for pushing p5.js such a big step forward. I'm amazed, really. I'm speechless. This is fantastic. This is a fantastic signal to the whole community.
I
And
mean,
yeah,
a lot of really amazing people worked on this to
yeah.
make it possible. Like I joined really like in the middle, like in medias res, as they say. So it's been really magical to see it
Hmm.
unfold and to like see what's possible with these tools. But it's really amazing. I really encourage everyone to like check out just the volume of things. Like this is one part of the release notes. Like we didn't talk at all about color today.
Hmm.
Other things that have been added is JavaScript authoring and shaders. So you can now write shaders with JavaScript.
Inside of a. All
Yeah,
right. Okay. Okay.
and we can do it right now. And this, let's
Let's go crazy.
why not?
Let's
We're
do
already
this.
here. So let's say I have let's return to a slightly whatever. We can stay here. So I'm going to first show one of the built-in shaders. So maybe people have already used this. This has been around for a while. So this is a
Mm-hmm.
filter shader that just
Mm-hmm.
creates a blur.
Yeah.
You can parameterize it, but you can see the code for blur in the code base. So we're going to create a new filter that's going to pixelate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Give it a name. This one will slow down on a phone.
Yeah.
And this is another thing where defining the shader itself will happen in setup.
Mm-hmm.
But as you can see, it's using not JLS cell, but rather JavaScript. So here we have a few kind of very specific keywords. Not everything is implemented with this feature. So this is P5 strands. And if anybody's watching and really interesting to dig in, there is a tutorial about kind of what the scope of this is at the moment on the beta
Mm-hmm.
website. But yeah, let's give this a run. So
Oh
there's
my
that. We
God.
can change the number of pixels. Let's just really go.
This is absolutely insane. I love it. Wow. But one question, Kit. The
Yeah.
shader, mostly, I
Yep.
think, as far as I understand, like shaders are always running on a GPU, right? So
Yep.
I'm asking myself, like you said that it's going to slow down a bit. Why? But why? Isn't it something that is completely independent from the CPU?
Oh, it's just that I've noticed that whenever I was doing filter shaders in particular, so things like this, they just happen to take a lot of resources. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, other shaders like vertex shaders or other fragment shaders that operate in pixels happened to be a little faster, and I was able to like do a lot of stuff on mobile with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think on mobile it's a little different how like hardware optimization works. I don't really know what the general guidance on that is. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, you can totally work on this sketch on your phone.
That's super nice.
It might be slow. It might look like it looks slower than the computer. I think that's a question of exactly,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's
I mean, a bit recommendation for everyone who intends to write P5.js code on a phone. I prefer a laptop, so I think everybody else would probably do, but it's
I think
possible.
it's one of those things is like on the one hand to actually author code, yes. On the other hand, I think it's magical that you can.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is
is that
true.
you have a sketch, and actually, anybody who's using the editor as a kind of last invitation. So let's say um, you use your editor and this is your screen. So this is now li
Hmm.
library management. By the way, this is where the compatibility add-ons.
Cool. Okay.
Ta-da! You're in 2.0.
Wow.
It's opted. There's all these resources to the compatible. Everything I mentioned today, you can find in links. There's Discord threads and stuff about it. But if you're on your phone
Hmm.
and you have a sketch, you can always change the URL
Hmm.
from sketches to full, and that's going to fill up on your phone screen. So it's
Wow.
things like if you have authoring a sketch from scratch, yeah, no, you're right. I wouldn't really truly do that.
Hmm.
However, if you're changing one little piece,
Hmm.
which that's part of what I think is really fun with shaders, is like you change like one thing and it looks totally different, and you can just sit there and contemplate it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's true.
so it's like I think this actually is a pretty good use case for that. So I've really enjoyed it, and I'm just sharing that you can.
Yeah, and this is also something that kind of again connects the community because, first of all, we talked about like integrating the community of graphic designers more again into the creative coding sphere
Yeah.
by adding features that they want since a long, long, long time, right? And now, like I have quite a few friends who love writing shaders and they are, not really using it in P5.js. And now bringing
So
this together is amazing. That's great.
you please, everybody's input is super welcome. So P5
Uh-huh.
strands, which is like the shader authoring feature. So it's like the way that we kind of translate JavaScript into shader code. That's experimental and that's really open to new ideas or new contributors. Also, in terms of like next steps for variable fonts, I've mentioned there's like these various like loading improvements that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But also maybe those of you who work with variable fonts have the clear next question of like, okay, well, I showed you text weight, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Obvious question. What about all the other stuff? So let's say I'm browsing variable fonts
Hmm.
and I pick something that has
Good
different,
work.
yeah.
Nice.
And let's see if can I test it somewhere? Yeah. So
Okay.
this is a font that's going to do
Ooh,
ooh,
sweet. Yay.
fun.
Oh,
So let's say I want to get that. I'm gonna get rid of this one. And again, when you're getting this, by default, the CSS is not going to include the variable font. It'll be full access. So this is also like work in progress. Um,
hmm.
but let's say I wanted to start with the weight-based font,
Hmm.
and then I wanted to move to that one. So that one's not quite going to work the same way, but you can still load it and start playing around with it. So here I'm going to add the generated link.
Hmm.
So I won't have access to the font variable quite yet, but yeah, that's work in progress.
Ah, that means you can load the font first in CSS and then you have it in your sketch.
Well, you don't have access to the font variable. So for example, if you wanted to do like text to points, you couldn't quite do that just yet.
Hmm.
But you have access to the font, like you're able to use the font.
Wow.
And here, I believe that should work.
This is working? Oh gosh,
Let's see if I
that's crazy.
oh wait till you see the next thing. Uh, so but that one, notice it doesn't have any weight, so that's not gonna do much. I'll keep the pacing.
Hmm.
Um, I'll just rename it a little bit.
Hmm.
Uh, This is rotation effect because we have this rotation in X and Y.
Hmm.
And so this is part of what's kind of been implemented as a very like open-ended API part of the API. So for example, text property here, it's like
Hmm.
ideally this is a little bit easier to use. Like the way text weight is very straightforward. But I think that requires a little bit more discussion about what the API should look like.
Hmm.
Because different variable fonts will have different axes of variation. So let's see
Hmm.
how that works.
Loading.
Yeah, it's decided it's going to space today. There we go.
Oh.
And it's there.
Oh my God. I need to call three people who will, freak out about this. This is amazing.
So basically this is definitely like a little bit of an edge thing. So again, if you're using this, please, contact me or, be
Hmm.
on the GitHub discussion. So on how to shape kind of the next improvements here. Because
Hmm.
notice what's happening. Rather than having the text weight, you have text property, font variation settings. Okay, that's probably going to be the same for other variable fonts. And then you have these kind of particular things that are specific to that font. And that's also something that you can see in the CSS itself, what the titles of those are
Hmm.
and what the ranges of them are. So each of them, these are two different variables.
Hmm.
Um, and these are their two respective ranges.
Hmm.
So that means when I provided a value of some sort, it ought to be in that
Hmm.
range and it ought to be called that. So different variable fonts, you'll be able to try out what it actually does in the browser and then be able to organize your sketch around it. So yeah, try it
Oh,
out.
I will. And this is amazing. Super cool.
So yeah, thanks for checking out this little demo. I'm really, really excited to see what people come up with.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that people will love it. I'm super hyped. But I think the main thing that hypes me right now is that, there's motion, there's movement. People are working on this. They are making it more accessible. They are integrating more other communities that are in the edges of the creative coding sphere, like the graphic designers, like the people who would love to create something with shaders. Like, you're getting everybody on board, and that's something that I would also say is a diversity. Let's say, movement forward. Well, I don't find the word right now, but it's pushing the things into the really right direction. Thank you so much for your work, Kit. That's
Thank you
I
so much for
appreciate it.
creating the space to share this, and for
Sure.
sharing this with your community. I'm so excited to see where this goes. And yeah, in terms of like increasing inclusion, I think this we use so much this term beginner friendliness, and I
Mm-hmm.
think more and more it's like I'm a beginner in some things and not a beginner in other things. And I think that's true for more or less anyone, is that there's like things you're a beginner in and not others. And I think figuring out a way to make these tools available and interesting and um, something that folks can really weigh in on the design of, like making our own tools as like one of the core
Yeah.
motivations for P5.js as a project, uh,
Mm-hmm.
for people that have expertises in different areas and that are maybe like learning an entirely kind of like different set of things that are relevant to their practice. I think this like variety of practice would be so exciting to see. So thank you so much for creating this space.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much. What's next? What's the next steps for you, for P5JS, for the foundation? What excites you about the future of your work?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. There's a lot of really exciting things going on. We've got a couple of programs ongoing. So we have the fellowship and the pros grants that are open right now. So as a
Mm.
foundation, that's always really, really exciting. I'm not involved in those quite directly. I'm working on the Google Summer of Code program, which is also so exciting as a way for new contributors to join. So in any case, there's these different ways that new folks and people from the P5JS and processing communities can like work on projects. The fellowship call is specific to data storytelling, and I think that's really exciting. There's also a really
Mm-hmm.
interesting kind of theatrical and immersive component to it for folks who are like LA based. So that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And the pros grant is focused on the theme of building bridges. And there's actually an info session about it in the next few weeks. So I think that's something that if people are interested in like contributing to like specifics of how the P5JS and processing ecosystem could potentially be bridged, that would be